Up next, Margaret Taylor.
My name is Margaret Taylor, and I don't have any books on that table over there, but I do have business cards, so if you want to learn anything more about my writing, you can pick up one of those. It's got URLs and email address and things like that. Okay, what I'm going to be reading today is the beginning of a novel I'm working on called Cannon Fodder. So, Chapter 1. Alec could already hear glass breaking downstairs. It was awake for an evil overlord, after all. He itched in the formal pants and shirt that he'd scrounged up earlier. His home had gone strange on him. Everything was still there, the worn-out molding, the artificial torches set in brackets on the walls, the cabinets of poison over the stairs, the scorch marks. But this house had no Aunt Viper in it anymore. Time to face the music, he thought. He took a step down, then heard a voice behind him. Hey. Listeria emerged into the fake torchlight on the landing. She'd been his friend in villain school, though she was a couple grades ahead of him, and already an evil overlord in her own right. Alec was used to seeing her in a spangly, skin-tight bodysuit, but today she ditched it for a dress. It only added to the feeling that everything in the world had gone upside down. I heard, she said. Alec wanted to snap something back, like, of course you've heard. Do you go around attending wakes and you have no idea why you're there? Then he took another look at her and choked. There was something very unevil in her eyes. If the Norgolian Society of Evil Overlords ever found out about a look like that, she was toast. This is never going to happen again, Alec said. He couldn't meet her eyes. Get that? Listeria started to say something, then stopped. After a few moments, she nodded at the stairs. Let's go. Alec was glad to have his friend with him as they headed down. The sounds of the wake swelled, then they came into full view of Aunt Viper's, now his, parlor. Even though that afternoon they pushed all the furniture out of the room except for one table, there were so many villains in there they could scarcely move. The NSCO villains didn't know how to dress right for a wake. Half of them wore black to work anyway, so they'd come here in black capes, black leather, black armor, black spikes. The other half of them worked in the skin-tight stuff, so tonight it looked like they'd rummaged around in their closets for something less clingy. The only table in the room held a casket, a very closed casket. The villains had bunched up as well as they were able and gotten to drinking. Every few seconds, one of them would shove his neighbor or pick a pocket. But at the sight of Alec at the foot of the stairs, the action died away. You don't look like her, somebody said. Alec gritted his teeth and waded into the crowd of people. It was impossible to avoid bumping elbows and shoulders, which was a dangerous thing to do around these people. He would have rather been just about anywhere else right now, but he had to find the NSCO's arms dealer if he was going to go through with his plan. A hand grabbed his chin and turned his head. Alec found himself looking into the eyes of a woman in a maroon sweater with a paisley tie. She had a tanned hide and she smelled of cigarette smoke. He didn't know this evil overlord, but he knew he'd better not piss her off. Are you really the Viper's nephew? Another twist of the head. I can't see any of her blood in you. Alec put a hand up to his chin and made an experimental pry under those chipped fingernails. She let go. 5 or 6 other villains had gathered around to watch. One of them was over 6 feet tall and had a poofy black beard. Answer me, boy, said the cigarette woman. I don't know, Alec said. He felt himself flush. What do you mean you don't know? Quit it, said another overlord. He means that you can never be sure who the father is. I have to go talk to the Merchant of Death, Alec said. He tried to push past the ring of villains, but he didn't get far because of the crowd. How could that be? I don't remember the Viper mentioning a brother, the cigarette woman said. She turned to the crowd. Does anybody remember the Viper mentioning a brother? Viper said he could call her Aunt Viper. She didn't say why, Listeria said. Listeria had quietly inserted herself at Alec's side. Alec wished she hadn't. He'd been handling on his own just fine. The cigarette woman rounded on her. And you would know because you're the new spy girl, would you? It doesn't matter, the bearded man said in a basso voice that stopped the conversation in its tracks. How are you going to take your revenge? didn't like the way the bearded man was looking at him. He was a tall, broad lump of a man inside a shirt with sailboats on it. He had an eye patch over one eye. The other eye regarded Alec like he was a small piece of ham. "I've got something in mind," Alec said. "That's why I need to go talk to the Merchant of Death." He edged away. "Are you going to cause maximum destruction to the Empire? Rain down violence and tears? Bring little Walker to her knees?" Something was wrong with this guy. He was already red in the face. He made an expansive movement with his arms and smacked another guy in a catsuit in the elbow. The catsuit guy growled. "I'm working on it." Alec risked a glance over his shoulder. The crowd had closed behind him. Not much chance of an escape route back upstairs. "What have you killed so far?" The man put his fists up. Huh? What the heck was he supposed to do? Were they supposed to fight? Then, to his relief, he spotted a face he recognized in the crowd. It was the Merchant of Death. "Did I hear my name?" The merchant attempted to swoop into the circle, but it turned into something more like a shove past a pair of bald men in suits. "Move over, Blackjack. If I'm correct, this young man would like to talk to me." "Come on, let's fight," Blackjack roared. "Let's show off what you can do." He swung his arms wide again, and this time knocked the cigarette woman in the nose. Suddenly, the parlor had a lot more room in it than it did before, and Alec found himself in the middle of an open space with Blackjack, the cigarette woman, and the Merchant of Death. At least the stereo had the common sense to beat it. The merchant spoke close to Alec's ear. "Duck." Alec ducked. He felt air ruffle his hair as an arm swung just past his head. Someone shrieked. Then the merchant's hand was pressing on his shoulders, guiding him out. They shoved their way to the door at the far end of the parlor. The merchant wrenched it open, pushed Alec through, then himself, then slammed it shut. Alec leaned back against the wall, still too dazed to speak. His heart was pounding. The old portrait of Maximus the Disgusting glared down at him from the opposite wall. It had been there for as long as he could remember. "Never liked crowds anyway," the merchant said. He dug a watch out of his coat pocket and examined the dial for scratches. Apparently satisfied, he returned it to his pocket. Alec's tongue finally began to work again. "Was that," he looked at the door, "is that what Blackjack looks like in real life?" The Merchant of Death nodded. "Was he drunk?" The merchant tilted his head in a way that didn't entirely answer the question. "How are you holding up, Alec?" he said. Now that he wasn't in danger of being trampled anymore, the misery was back. The feeling like he wanted to crawl into a hole and stay there forever. It had been dogging him for the past 2 days, ever since it had happened. It must have shown, because the Merchant of Death put a hand on his shoulder. She was clever. Clever wouldn't save you when you were mobbed by a hero and 20 fully armed Imperial troopers. But Alec made himself straighten up, take a deep breath, and look the merchant fully in the eye. "I'm going into business." "Thought you would," the merchant said. Something went thump against the wall behind Alec. The roof timbers rattled. "Let's talk about this somewhere else, shall we?" the merchant said. The two of them walked rather briskly away down the hall. "I'm looking for something really big," Alec said, "and scary. The most important part is that it gets the good guys really, really freaked." They took a turn into the Viper's study. Alec wasn't sure he could ever get used to thinking of this stuff as his own. It was also Viper. Though her lab was in the basement, she would bring her work up here most days and get grease stains all over the books. Simulated firelight played over shelves filled with manuals and recipe books and broken doomsday device parts. The whole place smelled like mineral oil. A piece of butcher paper that was taped up by a bay window outlined her plan to make pencil leads out of real lead. She'd come back from that one with a broken leg. A table by the fire had been converted into a work table. Alec remembered the lessons at that table, Viper with her list bashing the names of the poisons into him. Digitalis acted on the heart. Arsenic pretended to be phosphate in the body. The liver of a certain tropical fish shut off nerve cells. The Merchant of Death pulled a couple of chairs over to the artificial fire, away from the work table, and they sat down. The fire lit up strands of silver in the merchant's hair. For an evil overlord, getting old enough to get gray hairs was an accomplishment. May I ask you what you're planning to do with this? The merchant said. I'm not going to tell you that. Appropriate answer. There was a quirk that was almost a smile. Well, Alec, I think I can cut you a deal. Okay, thank you very much.